Good morning and welcome to Proverbs chapter 20. Yesterday we went through the very first verses, and today it looks like we're going to hit verse 5, 6, and 7. So, as always, a quick recap from yesterday. A reminder that it is not wise to be led astray, and that wine and strong drink is something that can lead you astray. Verse 2 reminded us that whoever provokes someone to anger, and they were talking about the wrath of a king, you kind of sin against yourself and saying you're setting yourself up for a situation because you're the one provoking someone in authority to be upset with you. Verse 3, it talked about any fool can start an argument, but it takes a man of honor to stop one, and to be a peacemaker. Verse 4, the lazy man doesn't do the work, but then when it's time for harvest, he's like, what? I don't have anything? And it's just like, really, you really shocked because you didn't really do anything. And so let's see, verse 5 is where we pick up today. So let's do a dive into verse 5. King James Version, it says, counsel in the heart of a man is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. So I want you to picture the image of someone at a well, and they've reached, and there's like old school well, they can't just crank and pull it up, but where they gotta have the rope tied on the bucket, and they've got to lower it down until they know they've hit something, and then they have to draw it, slowly pull it back all the way up to the top before they get the water. So we're going to break the verse down into, look at the word counsel from King James Version. Well, in other translations of the word, instead of the word counsel, you'll see purpose, the purpose of a man's heart, the intentions of a man's heart, the thoughts of a man's heart. And the deep water analogy is pretty consistent. The deep water imagery is pretty consistent, but sometimes it'll say like an ocean or something like that. When it gets to a man of understanding, they're talking about a man who has insight. One just said somebody who's smart. And then they say, well, draw it out. The only other word besides draw it out, because I think they're really trying to get you to picture something being drawn from the deep, is the word discover. All right, so when we look at that and put it together, here's my hodgepodge of what all those different translations kind of went like. And I'm just going to read what I wrote last night. A prudent, wise man understands the real intentions, thoughts, motives, or purposes of a person. And he realizes that those real things that a person is really thinking or feeling or what actually motivates them, that's like deep water. That's below the surface. I know many of you have seen that image of the iceberg. And it was like, yeah, you may see the tip of the iceberg and this little piece this person shows you. But that iceberg is just not that little tip that's floating on top. It's a whole lot connected with that iceberg that you will not see unless you take a deep dive. It talks about an insightful person knows how to wisely take that deep dive. If you watch somebody scuba dive, they're not just going to scuba dive and look like the same person who is going swimming. No, they have on completely different gear. Why? Because they're preparing for a deeper dive with a deeper person, right? Or for a deeper reason. It says an insightful person knows how to discover things the average person would neglect, ignore, or simply not put the work or effort into to get to know. So when we seek understanding, we're actively looking for it. And so if we're seeking understanding from a person and you're trying to draw that out, whether drawing knowledge out from a person or a subject matter, you got to go beyond that little tip of the iceberg and be willing to take that deeper dive. One of the commentaries, it says, the pulpit commentary says that understanding will cause you to ask more astute questions. I know John Maxwell, he has a book, and I don't want to mess the name of the book up, but it's talking about making connections. I think it's like the 5 ways you make great connections with people. But one of them is asking really good questions to really learn, who are you talking with, who are you talking to, one of his questions is, what do you know that you think, I need to know, or people need to know, or, and I was like, that's a question I've rarely asked. But then I posed that question to someone, and I got the most amazing answers. I was like, wow, I would have never thought to ask that on my own. A commentary by Poole says, by prudent questions and discourse and a diligent observation of words and actions, you're able to get a deeper understanding of things and people. Agreed. All right, so let's go to Proverbs 20, verse 6. It says, most men will proclaim each his own goodness, but who can find a faithful man? And keep in mind, these verses are layering up. So the first verse talks about, knowing the purpose and intent of somebody's heart. That's a deep thing. That's not always what you just see on the surface. It takes wisdom to figure that out or see that. This verse says, sure, because people can easily tell you how good they are and tell you about themselves. Oh, yeah, because they always tell you the good part. But the second part of the verse says, but who can find a faithful man? The Brenton, I'm going to say this probably wrong, Subsequent translation says, a man is valuable, a merciful man is precious, but it's hard to find a man. And it's funny because to me it seems like the end of that just went kind of hood. It was like, it's hard to find a man. I mean, the pulpit commentary though goes into love and mercy may be common enough in terms of an outward expression. You can get a card that says, I love you and I'm thinking of you and things like that. They said, but in contrast, it's like the difference between showing and telling. When kids are writing, we have to tell them, you guys, okay, you're supposed to be showing in your story, not just telling it. Write a story. I went to the store and got some bread. I'm like, okay, well, show me. And they're like, show me. I went to the store and got bread. And it's like, yeah, okay, what store did you go to? And they got, Walmart. Well, who are you with? My mama, So, okay, so you and your mother went to Walmart on a cold winter day and you held your coat as you ran in past the wind. And they're like, see, you showed it. People can picture what you're talking about. But in this example, no, let your character speak for itself. Show that. Because there's a difference between a promise and performance. Okay? So, also, there's a difference between your intent and impact. So if you want to be a person of faithfulness, it's the things that you do. It says a faithful man doesn't want or need to proclaim his own goodness. Typically, your most faithful people are not the people who go on around talking about how good and faithful they are. They're just content with being it. Because just them being good to God and just God knowing it is good enough. They don't need to take a picture of the good thing they did and post it and get a bunch of likes to feel like they're good or that people know they're good, So you don't have to do all that. Some quotes that kind of went along with this was, actions speak louder than words. Don't just tell me, show me. Don't just listen to what people say without watching what they do. There was a quote that said, don't let somebody's words blind you from their behavior. So they're doing one thing and they're saying something different. Like, just listen to what I'm saying. Don't look at what I'm doing. It's like, no, I can't. A person's true colors will always show within time. And that's that analogy of that picture of that deep water. I don't know why I keep saying that. That image of that deep water. Come on, pull it to the top. What's really in the well? Do you really want to drink that water? Take your time. It says you may be fooled for a moment, but if you're patient and you see what happens, you'll see what you're really working with or dealing with. It says you are what you do, not what you'll say you'll do. So, and Proverbs talks a lot about, just not being a false witness. Don't be a false witness to yourself and others. Don't say all this stuff and talk all this good game. It's better, I've been told, it is better to just, and I'm going to probably say it wrong, under promise and over deliver. Instead of all of this, just let your actions go. It says people may not always tell you how they feel about you, but they'll always show you. Ooh. And this, I'm going to leave that alone. So pay attention. So last quote. Characterize people by their actions and you'll never be fooled by their words because their actions will speak very loudly even when they whisper in action. So here we go. It says, one commentary posted a question, and this was the Bridges one. And I was like, okay, this flipped it. It says, look at yourself in the mirror of God's word. Do your neighbors and friends, do they find you faithful? Would they speak faithfulness? Would they say you're faithful? So instead of you being, like this verse says, the man who proclaims his own goodness, does your life actions speak in a manner that another person would proclaim your goodness? Where they'd be like, oh, that person? Yeah, definitely. You can trust them. Yes. That person? Oh, no. If they say they're coming, they're coming. They're going to show up. They're dependable. That's somebody. Yep, that person minds their own business. Oh, you tell them something, don't worry, they ain't gonna tell nobody. I've never heard them tell anybody. It's that life. Do we live that type of life? It said the second question threw me. It said, do you often speak what you know will be accepted rather than what is true? And I was like, what? What does that have to do with the man being faithful? And then the following line backs it up. It says, never underrate the importance of moral integrity. Meaning, okay, a faithful man, the quiet satisfaction of a faithful man. Looking back at that verse, talking about what? Who can find a faithful man? Are you faithful with your words in terms of when you're talking, are you saying what's true? Are you talking about righteousness and living and talking, even speaking in integrity? Or do you compromise yourself and you're not faithful to God's word in conversation because you'd rather say what's accepted, so that people can still kind of cling to you than what you know is really true? And I was like, ooh. So, open-ended question. Let's go to Proverbs verse 7. And the righteous man walks in his integrity. His children are blessed after him. And if we wrap all of these 3 verses up today and crush them together, it just shows that I'm going to go right back up to the top real fast and we're about to be done. That when you look at the purpose and intentions of a person's heart, because remember the verse before that talked about people, being lazy and not wanting to do the work in the right season. And then when they think it's their time, they're looking at other people reap a harvest and they're like, I know I should be getting some. It's like, how you deceive yourself? You didn't put any effort toward it. And then our 5 is saying, listen, knowing the purpose and intentions of somebody's heart, a man of understanding will take the time. They'll put the work in to draw that out, to seek understanding, whether it be of a person or a subject matter or what have you. They're putting the effort in. This kind of makes me think about too sometimes, when people do have high level degrees, and those are not easy to get. They don't just. I had actually it was my cousin at a funeral, and she is a doctor, and she was like, I'm not trying to I'm not asking to be impressed with the letters of my name, because I'm a doctor behind my name. She's like, but what I'm saying is, though they don't give those letters out for free. It took work and labor to get those things. Because sometimes people think, oh, you got all of that. You think you're all that. No, I don't think I'm all that. I just know I put a lot of work in to be able to understand a particular subject. And I'm not saying I know everything. I know a certain amount of information about this subject because I've studied what other people studied about it and what they knew about it and what they learned, and spent time with people who are way better than I am, learning. So no, I don't know all of that, but I do take time to try to draw out knowledge, understand, and discover it. And if you add that, if you take the time to gain knowledge, draw it out, understand it, if you add that to being faithful with the knowledge that you draw out and that you understand, if you are steadfast and devoted to being a person of faith, to being trustworthy, to just living a good life. I think one of the best compliments any person can get, and I'm going to use the word man, but, if I go to a funeral and someone says, man, that was a good man, top statement of the world, not a rich man, not a successful man, not, oh, he was cool, he was funny. Okay, that's okay. But for them to be like, he was a good man. She was a good woman. She lived a good life. That doesn't sound like a lot, but I pray to God that when it's all over and done, when I leave this earth, if it's before the second coming of Jesus Christ, that somebody can speak of me that I was just good, which takes us to our last verse again, Proverbs 27. It says, the righteous man walks in integrity, leading a good, consistent life. And it says his children are blessed after him. So even when he's gone, his children are still walking in his blessings. And if they were his children, they had the privilege of watching their father or watching that person, the mother, live this life of integrity, an upright life. The child lived in that type of home with that type of example. And not so just the neighbors can see that you were faithful, but your greatest testimony is that your children can look back and be like, my mom was a good woman. My dad was a good man. Because they see the stuff nobody else sees. And if your children can testify to your goodness, it's real. because they see you in moments that you can hide and play off to everybody else. So, I love you. Be blessed and have a wonderful day in the name of Jesus.